I produced a book filled with illustrations. There's one on page 16 and 17 of two boys standing looking up at a huge wall that they're considering climbing over and going on an adventure. And of all the illustrations in the book, this is sort of, I think, defining of my life, and I think it's the most exciting one, which is we all imagine brighter futures. And it's as if we're standing at this wall and we don't know how to get over it, we don't know how to get to the other side, we don't know how to get what we want. And to me, it's the choice to climb the wall, it's the choice to find a way around the wall that is what distinguishes the innovators from everybody else. It's what distinguishes the doers from everybody else. It's what distinguishes those who find what they're looking for, those who find happiness. But the purpose of the book is to remind us that we cannot climb that wall by ourselves, that if we want to find that brighter future, if we want to change our lot, it is for us to find someone who will go with us, someone who will catch us if we fall down, someone who will help us up over the wall. And it's these two kids standing looking up over the wall. What's most important is that they're doing it together.
Don't think about it, just move your body. Listen to the music, sing oh, eh, oh. Just move those left feet, go ahead, get crazy. Anyone can do it, sing oh.
Those who choose to climb over the wall, it is those who will find their brighter futures. But we cannot climb that wall alone. Tonight, I can vouch for Simon's words in a very literal way, and I'm excited to share that story with you, as well as the lesson of connection that I learned along the way. To kick that off, I brought with me something that I am very proud of tonight. This orange headband, still covered in dry desert sand, dirt, and if you look closely, possibly blood, I'm not sure, was my finish line prize at the 2017 Las Vegas Tough Mudder. Woo! Now, the finish line of a Tough Mudder event is unlike anything I have ever experienced. Typically, the first glimpse that a runner has of the finish line at any other endurance event is one of great joy. No matter how exhausted mentally or physically that participant is, they know that they are just steps away from achieving a goal that they've worked very hard for. And they usually have spectators on both sides of them, smiling with support and giving shouts of encouragement. They're about to do something very special, and it's an exciting moment. In contrast, the first glimpse at the Tough Mudder that a runner has of the finish line is through the tangled mess of 1,000 hanging wires, some of which are electrified to 10,000 volts, of which Tough Mudder has lovingly named electroshock therapy. This event, this obstacle, the final of over 20 in the 11-mile run, replaces those smiles of support and shouts of encouragement with the knowledge that you must pass through this to be considered a finisher. Today, I'm very happy that my father captured this final lovely moment, of which I've lovingly named Ugly Cry in headband. But at the time, I was completely over it. Another contrast is the start line. Here I am with one of my teammates, Lonnie, with big smiles on our faces. We'd worked really hard to get where we were that day. And we were excited, we were ready, we were ignorant to what we were really stepping into. But we knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that we would finish this event with smiles just as bright as the ones you see here. So spoiler, right? That didn't happen. But what I started to understand was that while life has very significant moments at the finish and start lines, it's oftentimes that special in-between place that makes all the difference. It got me thinking about my own in-between spaces in life. For example, the 11-year space in between the start and finish of my bachelor's degree. The 4-year space in between the start and finish of my first failed marriage. The almost 30 years in between being born and meeting my birth mother for the very first time. The 7 years in between beginning to date and marrying, 7 years, my partner in life. That was just last August. We're crushing it after 5 months. And what I think about the most, I think, is that special 18-year space that most of us have with our children, all to ourselves, and that time that I had with my own family. When I think back to the space in between those start and finish lines, and thankfully many of them don't have finish lines yet, and I think about the start and finish and the space in between the Tough Mudder event, what I started to see is that there were some relevant truths that life has presented to me, but a lesson that I hadn't quite learned until it presented itself very clearly to me at the Tough Mudder. But backing up just a second, the real start line for me for the Tough Mudder happened in December of 2016 when a great friend of mine casually mentioned a Tough Mudder for the first time. Now, I had seen some marketing on Facebook and received some emails about the event, but I didn't know much about it, so I asked him to explain some more. It was, after all, a bucket list item for a great friend of mine. With a big, bright smile on his face, he went on to explain the event. A 10 to 12 mile endurance run on various treacherous terrain with significant elevation changes. He's like talking me into it already, right? 20 plus military style obstacles that play on common human fears, like heights, water, confinement, electricity. And as he went on to explain it, the same bright smile on his face, he looked at me very directly and said, "Doesn't that sound awesome? Do you think we should put a team together?" Here's what went through my head. The first thing I want you to know about me is I have a bit of an anxious response to heights. I wouldn't call it a full-out phobia, but certainly some anxiety. So here's what I thought. I am 5 feet tall, about 5'2" with heels on. And I had stopped listening to him after about the time he started talking about the 9 to 16-foot walls. So walls nearly twice and nearly triple my height. I thought to myself, anybody who would kind of take on this adventure must be crazy. But what really went through my head after I started looking at it a little bit more was, you want me to pay them to do what? But you've seen the start and the finish line, so you know what happened next. Over the next few weeks, with the help of some amazing people, we did put a team together. We trained with one of the best trainers in Rapid City, Mike Brown, at an awesome site, Hurricane Fitness, and we began our training journey. We trained for things like endurance, which just meant making everybody really uncomfortable, elevating our heart rate until we needed to stop. We trained for strength, where I learned that the human body has 650 muscles, 640 of which I didn't know could hurt. until I started Tough Mudder training. And for me, the most difficult, we trained for mental grit. What that means is that our trainer figured out what we were most afraid of and just kind of purposely put us in that situation as often as possible, with good intention to make sure that we were ready for the event. But for me, knowing those walls were waiting for us in Las Vegas haunted my dreams for months and nearly ended my journey several times. But soon, it was time to suit up in our blue Bat Grit crazy gear. We were ready. We had trained for months together. We had run together, climbed together, laughed together, celebrated together, cried together. Mostly I had cried and they had helped me off the wall, but we'd also run in tutus together. And along the way, we lost about 80 pounds together. We were ready. On October 28th, we became champions of the day in a way I hadn't expected. Over the 6.5 hours that we spent in the desert that day, running, climbing, swimming, crawling, crying, we came together and became something new. And I started to put together the truths that I was telling you about earlier. There's a couple of them. First, there will always be things that scare you. For me, it was those walls. Not really the walls themselves, but falling off the walls, I think, is what did me in. But what I noticed at the event was that something very special happened. As people ran past me, for the most part, of all shapes and sizes and fitness levels, to approach the first wall that we came across, my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I saw that they approached that wall without fear. And I had no idea why they were feeling that way. Was it just me that was terrified of these heights? But what I saw changed my mind very quickly. I saw people approach the wall and look to the left and look to the right and simply wait for someone to offer a boost, offer help. And they would climb to the top of that wall and someone would be waiting for them on the other side. And the same thing happened for me. I learned that day that while facing your fears may help you to overcome them, facing them with the trusted aid of teammates, friends, family, and sometimes complete strangers allows you not to just overcome your fears, but to conquer them and to help others do the same. I also learned that there will always be things you simply can't prepare for. As I said, we trained for months together, but nothing had prepared me for one of the final obstacles on the course, an obstacle that purposefully plummets your body temperature from the hot, dry desert run, we're about 10 miles in at this point, to a breathtakingly freezing cold ice bath. Of course, Tough Mudder gave this one a name too. The Arctic Enema. As a South Dakota woman, I know cold, as most of you here do tonight, but nothing could prepare me to slide into, swim through, and dive under obstacles within the obstacle. There was a moment when my body screamed no. I couldn't only not move forward, I had kind of forgotten how to take a breath, and I didn't know what to do. But it was in that moment that I felt one of my teammates simply reach out, take my hand, and pull me to the other side. This is life. There will be times for each of us in this room that we stand neck deep in something that all the research, development, preparation, and good intent simply could not have prepared us for. In those moments, let someone take your hand. And finally, I learned that there will always be things that will stop you in your tracks if you let them. For me, this came at the end: electroshock therapy. An obstacle that I hadn't given much thought or concern to either before or during the event itself. I figured that Tough Mudder had been safely running obstacle courses for about 10 years, and I didn't think that they would actually let us do anything that was truly dangerous. So I went about the course without much concern. That was until I approached the obstacle itself. The same runners, all shapes and sizes and fitness levels, that were passing me earlier in the day and giving me such inspiration, were still passing me. But when they came to electroshock therapy, many of them were brought to their knees when being shocked by 10,000 volts. So that slowed me down. But what stopped me was the sound. Think large-scale human bug zapper. It was that sound that instantly told me I was finished. I would not be finishing the course. I was done. So I looked around for my teammates to kind of give each other an out, even though we'd been so successful at every other obstacle. Right? I was looking for them to kind of be like, yeah, I don't know, we're going around. But as I looked this time to my left and this time to my right, I noticed something new. For the first time in over 6 hours that day, I stood alone. My teammates had had an entire discussion that I'd missed because I was so in my head. They'd collectively decided that the only way through this was to forge through this. They'd taken a deep breath and conquered the obstacle, assuming that I was with them. But again, I was hopelessly stalemated in my own head out of fear. For the next few moments, I wasn't sure what to do, because now I didn't have an out and my competitive nature kind of kicked in. I saw my team on the other side of this obstacle and the finish line just beyond that. And I had this terrible pull within me of horrible fear and righteous competition. Eventually, a force greater than myself, pushed me halfway through that obstacle, where I stood in kind of a clearing where there were no wires. I wasn't being shocked. I had been several times by this point. This is where things got really ugly. I started to sob uncontrollably. I again looked at my team, who of course were cheering me on, thinking, what is going on with her? But still I stood sobbing. And at this point, I'm like, my team's gonna come back for me. And they were like, no, we're not. Afterwards, several of them said, we were about to. And I was like, no, you weren't. I realized they weren't giving me the out that I was looking for. So then I looked to my right again, to the medical attendant, who I knew had the power to turn off the obstacle. And I begged him to do so. He asked me if I was injured, to which I said, no, not really, just terrified and uncomfortable. And he smiled at me, a smile that clearly said, it's time to get moving. So now I had 2 no's. I took a deep breath and I looked again at my team, and I caught direct eye contact with one of my teammates, my great friend who had talked me into this awesome opportunity. But I noticed that something had changed. As I looked at him, for the first time, possibly throughout this entire journey, his bright smile that had never faded started to. I looked at him, and his smile completely faded. He made very direct eye contact with me, raised his voice to a shout, and said, "Jamie, it's time for you to get up and finish what you'd started." Now, I don't know if that moment was inspirational or if it elicited just enough rage deep within my soul to spark one last shot of adrenaline. But I did get up, and I did move forward. And soon I was where I wanted to be again, in the arms of my teammates. Hopefully, no one here has 10,000 volts to overcome tonight. But I do know that each of us in the room has a wall that we need to conquer. We must come together and become something new. Let tonight be a new start line in that journey. And do let one another know when you need a boost over the wall. Thank you.